Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Patricia Kong. I am with Scrum.org. Really excited to, more so than ever. I usually am excited about these webinars, but more so than ever because we have a special edition Scrum Pulse for International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day to you, and happy International Women's Day to our panelists today. So I have three wonderful women with me who are Agile experts. They are professional Scrum trainers. They are located around the world, work in different areas, even not just based where they are. And so they have a lot of experiences that I'm hoping to call out for us to share. So the theme of International Women's Day this year is break the bias. And that can mean a lot of different things to different people. There's the cognitive psychology part of it. And there's also the theme that individuals, when we're talking about bias, can make us focus on this notion of stereotypes, discrimination, and the need for inclusivity and diversity. So I'm really hoping to explore with our panelists this day around the different perspectives that they have, thinking about cultures within organizations, genders, race, color, backgrounds, all that stuff, and how we can think about how those things really help us. And also when we think about Scrum and Agile, what that means for us at work as we're looking to create certain environments to just create a better place so that we can be people and move along and do things. So quick guidelines today, as usual, your microphones will be muted. This session is recorded. My colleague Lindsay is in the background and she'll be taking any of your technical questions, but she'll get this up for us within 24 hours. She's always great. If you'd like to watch it again, share it with your friends. I don't know. We are going to be having a discussion today, an open panel discussion that I'll moderate. But I'd like to leave a little bit of time at the end of the session, 10, 15 minutes to address your questions. So feel free to start putting your questions into the Zoom at the bottom of the screen, but I will wait till the end to take those. So keep them coming, but we'll definitely get to them. So again, this is a Scrum.org webinar. Who's Scrum.org? Or Scrum.org. We focus on training, education, certification, and community. So hopefully you can see from today what a consistent global community is, and what we represent in terms of the material that we teach and the values that we espouse. So there's that notion of consistency. That gentleman in the corner is Ken Schwaber, founder of Scrum.org and co-creator of Scrum. So let's get to it. That was 3 minutes in. Meet our panel today. Again, my name's Patricia Kong. At Scrum.org, I focus on enterprise agility and learning enablement. And I'm going to ask, just from the order that I see you in, Glaudia, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Patricia. So my name is Glaudia Califano. As you can see at the moment in the map, I'm there in the UK, but was actually born and bred in the Netherlands with a Dutch mother and an Italian father. And I started my Scrum journey in 2004. I think that was a quick introduction. I will point to Simran, who's the next person I can see on my screen.
All right, thanks, Glaudia. Happy International Women's Day, everyone. My name is Simran. I'm a professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org, and I also am an Agile coach. I'm the co-founder of a young company called Agile for Growth. We were founded in Phoenix, Arizona right now. As you can see on the map, I am in India. I do PSM, PSPO, PSU, and PAL-E workshops for Scrum.org, and I'm excited to be here to break the bias. Let me invite Mica.
Thank you, Simran. Hi, everybody. I'm Mica Syjuco. Most people do call me Mica, so feel free to call me that. I am currently a director at Avanade, which is the joint venture between Microsoft and Accenture. More specifically, I am the Global Agile Capability and Delivery Director for the organization, and I lead the Agile program for the company. Prior to that, I was the first woman to take on the Global DevOps and Agile Coaching Talent Community Head position at the organization, and I have worked with a number of large multinational corporations throughout my career, which has spans over 17 years now. I'm based in the US right now, but I was born and bred in the Philippines. So I have Southeast Asian and East Asian, I'll say, ethnicity. So quite a bit of a diverse experience there, hopefully, that I can bring to this panel. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I am now going to just stop sharing the screen. Oh, here we are. So again, everyone, feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A as they come along in our discussion. And I'll look at that at the end with the panel. So one of the things that just for the audience to understand is that before we got started, obviously, if you know me and my body of work, I asked each of these women what the outcomes that they were hoping people would get out of this. And there's a lot of people on live. And everything was really about how do we empower young women and girls? How do we help people understand that within the Scrum framework, how those things can help us navigate some of the complexity that we have navigated in our careers, right? So we've all experienced different things. A lot of people experience different things. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world that's really wild and crazy right now. So hopefully what we would like to do is offer some of our experiences, maybe discover some things among us that might help us be able to reflect on our own behaviors and our own biases that we might be bringing to the workplace and into our families and lives. So let's just get started. And the first thing that we have to knock down is just in terms of what does bias mean to you? How have you experienced this? And I'm going to ask you, Mica, because there's one thing that you gave away that usually comes up. And you said, like, I've been working for 17, 20 years, Agile, and a lot of people look at you and go, what? So, how have you experienced bias in that term as a woman, as a female of Asian descent, knocking up, especially in those organizations where you're pulling up to a certain table and saying, I'm a change agent, here's what we have to focus on. Who listens to you? What have you experienced?
Oh, great question, Trish. And I'll navigate this a little bit carefully, because I mean, very honestly, I will say that I'm fortunate that I work in an organization, and I've worked in other organizations as well, that really try to make sure there's diversity and inclusion, right? And are very conscious about these things. But that being said, right, with such large organizations, there'll always be outliers. You'll always have certain experiences, be it with vendors, with clients, or the organization itself. So some of the things that I've dealt with are, well, in software development, we already know that women, right, we're a smaller population than the men, but even within the Agile and DevOps space, right, within software development, it's even more of we have an even smaller population of women, right? And I think the last time I looked, it was less than 10%, around 8 to 10%, right, white are women. So being a woman in a position of leadership at this point in my career, right, or even earlier on, it was challenging, I'll say, for people to take me seriously, because one, well, I was the only woman in a senior leadership position in the space, and secondly, people for some reason think I look younger than I am. I'm not young by any stretch of the imagination. You heard the 2017 to whatever years, right? So I'm not that young, but I'm not young, period. But because of the way I look, perhaps also because of the energy I bring, which can be construed as young, I have had to really lead always with, okay, I have X number of years of experience. I have these certifications. This experience with this number of corporations and Fortune 500 clients, blah, 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 because I have to already preempt some of the bias that I've dealt with, which is like, okay, usually I'm the only woman at that table for this particular space. And that's been a challenge for me, right? Of course, it's still something that I navigate. The way I navigated it is I want them to focus on not the way I look, right? Or not the fact that I'm a woman. But hey, you know what? I have the same level of experience and skills as you, maybe even in some cases more, and put that up on the forefront. So yeah. Sorry, I don't know if that was too much.
No, but isn't that interesting, the fact that we have to walk in, or that you felt that you need to walk in? So first, that there are, people wouldn't maybe be that surprised to see Asian women in this industry as much as they would, a Black woman or other woman of color, right? So there's already, oh, okay, there's that Asian person, super smart, whatever those stereotypes are. But then they're going, you have to go and say, actually, here's my experience. You know, I'm not the PA or the marketing person. There's nothing wrong with that, but I've definitely fallen into those things. And it becomes an interesting thing that I've experienced where you feel like you're too young or you're too old. I don't know what that's been. Glaudia, do you have something in terms of the bias? We had this conversation a little bit that was preempted around this notion of age and the biases you've experienced.
Yeah, so I think when we had a discussion before, I just hit my 50s. So, and you do see a lot of concerns for people on the job market, for example, because there's some biases, and that can go, I experience that in both ways. So it could be that employers actually say, okay, we do want someone older because they have much more experience, and not particularly really looking if that's the right experience, you know, and the other way as well, saying, oh no, we don't really want someone of that age because they're stuck in their ways. So, and I think there's quite a concerns that people my age, when I look on platforms, etc., that they experience. I do want to say as well, when I'll just go back, when I was in my 30s, I hit a bit of a difficulty in the job market as well, because employers did see me as risk, because they thought, you're in your 30s, you're a woman, so that means you want to start a family, you're going to be distracted, you're going to go with maternity leave, you're not going to be focused on this.
Oh, Claudia's out with the real talk. She's out.
That was really a snag when I was in my 30s. I think that's now past with my age. But yeah, I actually did hear employers really say that, like, okay, this is a risk, you know, taking on a woman in her 30s. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I definitely hear that too. That's also highly illegal, just for anybody who wants to know, at least here. Simran, thank you. By the way, thank you all of you, to all of the panelists for sharing these intimate things, you know, just being really courageous and open. Simran, how about for you and where you are? What biases have you experienced in general and at the workplace?
So let me share with you, when I became a trainer, a professional Scrum trainer, or when I used to do workshops in 5-star hotels in their banquets, all the people at the reception would expect a male to be there, because most of the people they have come across, and for them it's a fact, they have come across is a man. And there used to be minute things like the position of the flip chart. It used to be taller than I am, right? Is that a reflection of their bias? Absolutely, right? But here I am to break that bias, to let them know I'm a trainer, I can teach as well, I'm one amongst you. And I think Scrum has empowered me to be able to do that, yeah, and Scrum.org as well. So yes, there are biases, but we are here to break them.
We are here to break them, and hopefully we'll get into those conversations at the end of some ideas of how to break them. Now, I'd like to take this more into the Scrum space. Well, one of the things, just in general, that might be interesting in a bias, and especially I've encountered this as a female, and I know some of my counterparts have, is that you may come in as the Agile coach, as a Scrum Master, as director, consultant, and you have the people who are actually in the teams, the team members, developers, and they're just saying those people do not know what they're talking about, right? They point to the Scrum Master and the coaches, and they're saying, you know, we're the technologists, you don't. And I've seen this happen, especially with women, right? I had a global woman come in heading e-business, and she could not get any respect from the teams. And so I'm wondering, right, because this path goes two ways. Have any of you experienced that when you come in and just the Scrum teams want nothing to do with you?
I'll just have, oh, sorry, Mica, you raised your hand. You go. I should have raised my hand anyway.
No, you go first. I'll go after.
I think the problem that I've seen is that teams are, when we talk about Scrum, we're talking about that we want teams to be product teams to solve problems. We're problem solvers. And I have experienced this at companies where teams are still order takers or feature factories. And I think then it's really important actually changing that mindset that we're all problem solvers and we need that involvement. You don't have one person with a brilliant idea and then just hands it over. Whereas a team, we need to solve problems and all get involved. And that's where you get innovations, getting all these different perspectives. So yes, I did have experienced that, but more in those environments where it was still very much traditional order taking instead of problem solving and innovation.
Thank you. Mica?
So I think, again, I'm fortunate enough that the environments I've worked with, and whether it be with clients or organizations I've worked under, have been conscious about these things. So I've never had something so blatant, if you will, but I think I have dealt with clients who, when they encounter me, whether in person, because there was a time where in person was still a thing, where you go for on-site visits, and it's obvious that they weren't expecting me, right? Or I almost feel like I get asked questions that, hey, if I were a man, right, would you be asking me these questions? So that was more of the degree where I encountered it, where there was a degree of skepticism that, oh, are we really going to listen to this little, of course they wouldn't say it out loud, but are we really going to listen to this little girl? And especially because I am short, I'm barely 5 feet, and they ask me more questions about my experience and things that I can bring to the table versus, again, if it were a man, I feel like, and I've seen actually, this is not a hypothesis, I've seen it happen where I come with a man, and then why is the man not getting the same questions that I'm getting? So
it's that, right? Yeah. It's that. Yeah. So it might not be blatant, but like you said, it's a little bit of who are you? What is your CV? And what is your right to be here? And so there does seem to be some of that blatant. Simran, did you have something?
Yes, sure. So with respect to Scrum, here is a bias that I have observed with participants that come to my workshop. So there are a lot of organizations that are moving now from the traditional way of working or waterfall to Scrum. And there are a lot of traditional managers out there who are still looking to fit into Scrum. And so here is what I have observed. A lot of organizations have just picked up their traditional managers and they have now made them as Scrum Masters. So they still do their old things of giving instructions, being bossy, telling people what to do, planning for them, and they call themselves Scrum Masters. Is it an outcome of that transition? Sure, it may be. So I see that when women come to my workshops, they are hesitant to become a Scrum Master. And the reason they say is because they see the Scrum Master as a person who is bossy, who goes around, bashes people, and she doesn't want to be that. I would like to say that this is a bias, and I encourage participants in my workshop to come and understand what a Scrum Master really does from a servant leadership standpoint. In fact, I would go on to say that as women, we could become better servant leaders, because that's something that we have intuition, that empowerment to others, that enablement for others' success. We are driven to help them get that. So I think that's a bias I had myself as well at one point in time. But I think that's what Scrum can help us achieve for other people as well.
Let's get straight into that. So Simran, let me stay with you. Because you're talking about, in some instances, there's this misperception. And I've seen this, and maybe this is my own bias, especially in Asian culture, because this came up to me when we did the release of Scrum Guide 2020, where it says the Scrum Master is a true leader. And what there was this assumption or this interpretation was that the Scrum Master is this big manager role now, right? And in bad Scrum, that's what's emphasized, that's what's misunderstood. And that has maybe unintentionally created some of those biases. So how would you think about that in terms of, but the Scrum Master, the Scrum guy says true leader, right? And you brought up some things. So what do you think about that? Getting that out of their head.
Sure. So I would like to expand on that term, true leader. A true leader is not a person who brings in his or her own agenda. A true leader would be someone who is serving the people's agenda, the team's agenda, helps them meet their objective, helps them connect with the bigger purpose, that why they are working together, right? So is that what a Scrum Master is trying to do? Absolutely. Scrum Guide is just 14 pages. But let's also understand that in order to just understand one accountability, the Scrum Master, we have an entire 2 days workshop designed around that. Yeah. So I'm sure each word means a lot when you put it to work, right? And that true leader as well, go on, anyone can go on, do some research and understand what a true leader would really mean. A leader might not necessarily mean a person who is prescribing something to the team, but rather helping them achieve more. Yeah.
I love that. A true leader, it's not about their agenda. So let me take it on the other side. And Glaudia, this one's for you. So what we've just talked about is, this abuse of the Scrum Master role, from this misperception that I am the head and I'm going to tell you exactly what to do because I'm the true leader. So this misperception there. What I found also is that there's this other misperception, there's this other stereotype and bias that the Scrum Master is actually a very soft role. And soft may not be the right word, but it seems like a very diluted role. And it's something where they're just kind of maybe scheduling things, or they're just here to talk about feelings, and kindergarten teachers make the best Scrum Masters. And so what I found from that when I'm engaging with teams is I have seen, for instance, a team where they said, okay, we're going to do Scrum now. And they looked at the woman, the female software developer, very senior developer experience, and said, do you want to be the Scrum Master? And she never raised her hand, never expressed anything. Have you seen another side of that where it was always this, women make really good Scrum Masters?
In the end, I think I do get the, I think you hit the nail on the head actually, is that there's this misconception that the Scrum Master is a lot about, like in certain companies, they see it as an administrator, organizer, and then they have the bias, women are better at organizing. So that's kind of where it comes back to. That's kind of the thought process. So I have seen that. The interesting part that I always talk about is like, you do hear a lot about, yes, soft skills, but I always see it's like the stance a Scrum Master takes, and also the Scrum Master that an organization and a team needs at a certain moment in time all depends on context. And that's how I see it. So I've worked with so many Scrum Masters who are completely different approaches, some of them have really good soft skills with other skills. Some people are very technical. So I think it just also depends on the context. But yes, I do believe I have seen indeed that they think, oh, the Scrum Master role is more about, indeed, like you said, a bit fluffy and organizing and schedule events, and women are good at organizing. So here you go. But I think it's up for us as well to like the role of the Scrum Master, of course, is also helping the company to understand, the organization to understand Scrum, and the accountabilities of a Scrum Master. So, and I think that's where we can help, to make those accountabilities very clear, also take away those biases. So,
yeah. And there's this duality there in terms of, is it because of a stereotype about gender, or is it a misunderstanding of the accountability of what a Scrum Master does? And when you take those two together, it's intertwined because people come with their biases. That's what today is about, right? So thank you for that, Glaudia. Well, that leads us nicely to even thinking about something about diversity, right? So there's this notion of diversity, inclusivity, and we say, hey, that's the best way for Scrum teams to be. Mica, have you seen that to be true?
Absolutely. So So I think that the fact, again, more and more, right, we're becoming truly global, right? Everybody, small scale, big, large scale, but having that diversity of experience, right? Diversity of culture, diversity of opinion, right? I've seen a lot of problems that seemed so hard become so easy to solve when we worked together and really made sure that we accounted for everybody's experience and everybody as an equal player, right? So I've seen that work very well. Like some of the most successful Scrum teams that I've seen were the ones that did have that again, that diversity of opinion and experience, and just being able to find solutions that were unusual or unique. Really, they weren't that unusual or unique to do with the others, but then from our perspective, once it came together, it just made sense. So absolutely, I think that getting from that wealth of experience that isn't just one-sided, right? That just opens up avenues for more options, and that enables problem solving to become so much easier.
It's interesting that if you actually look at the science behind it, you can say that when there are people who are too diverse, they're not gonna get along, right? But the interesting thing is that when you're looking at overperforming, when you have that diversity of thought, and people start to complement people in different ways, that you can have this 2 + 2 = 5. It doesn't always have to equal 4. Actually, it does equal 4, but it's this difference of thought that you can have. And I think just from a human side, I think that when you have those experiences, for me, you will become friendly with a person that you never thought you would, right? And so that's been my own experience too. Glaudia, what did you have to chime in?
Yeah, I wanted to chime in just about like diversity and having diverse teams. And for me, it's even more importantly than to have inclusion, because you can have so many diverse perspectives, but if you're not open to it, if you don't include it, if you don't leverage those different perspectives, then you probably can get, clashes as well. So it's a kind of, I think the inclusion part is really important to highlight for me, at least in my experience.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Glaudia. And I will build off of that. And I know already spoke, so hopefully this is okay, Trish. But I forgot to include, I guess, from my experience, the whole onshore offshore team perspective, right? So I think it was sometimes there's bias, right, from certain parties. You know what, quote unquote, the offshore teams, they're not really thought leaders. They're more doers, right? The thought leadership comes from onshore, which is wrong, right? But I think there's that bias. So I think that Scrum, through the diversity of experience and the openness and the Scrum values, we're able to overcome that and give these, people, whether they're from onshore or offshore, equal opportunity to speak up and share their opinions and be part of the decision-making process. And that's really, I think, one key thing, solid thing that I've seen Scrum really help facilitate in our experience. And I love the nod from Glaudia, because I love that you've seen this as well. So, yep, just wanted to end that there.
Thank you. Simran, you've had your hand up for a while.
So I would like to point at two things that Scrum talks about. One is the cross-functionality of the team. And then the second is that everyone who contributes toward creating value, in Scrum, we call them developers. So as a cross-functional team, as a diverse team with different skills that we have together, Scrum kind of helps us focus toward the higher objective that unites us. Whether it is during the sprint, it's the sprint goal, or in the higher perspective with respect to the product, it's the product goal. So it helps us kind of forget about, well, what's the diversity between us, appreciate that, respect that, work with each other, collaborate, and focus toward our higher objective that we are trying to achieve through the sprint goal or the product goal. So I think those elements in the Scrum framework help us create this level of diversity and openness where we are able to work with each other as a single unit, as a single team.
Thank you. That's the absolutely like that's the important thing. And one of the things that I can bring this back to is Mica, you were talking about this notion of thinkers and doers. So if we remove everything out of this, right? Imagine that everything is gray, and it's just really the struggle that organizations have and usually it is someone who appears to be a size white man at the top, but it's this notion that the people who are leaders are thinkers and doers. So let's just talk about this bias there. So there's the thinkers, and then there's the doers. And how do we work around that bias there? I mean, you were bringing the onshore and offshore up, but how is it that we, how do we break that stereotype, and how does Scrum support that you have these people who have fascinating ideas, will create these things, and now you go do them. And I have a lot of struggles when I'm talking to offshore teams around that, where they're just saying, but I don't even understand what value is, Patricia, because I'm so far away from it. My world is here. What can we do to work against that bias, where it's the really smart people who think, and then it's the little people who do? Anybody want to take that one? I forgot to say name. Mica, what do you think?
Oh, no, I was just saying that's a hard one, Trish. so I think, yeah, Scrum, again, the way it's built, just having that collaboration between business and developers. And sometimes it comes down to that. Sometimes they're just thinking that, oh, the thinkers are the business, right? They know, they're the ones who say, this is what we want. These are the great ideas. And maybe the developers are the doers, right? Because they take those ideas and they just execute them, but they don't really contribute to the thought leadership, right? I mean, there's a bit of that for dysfunctional teams. So I think if you are, doing Scrum right, and breaking down those barriers between business and the development, and having everybody collaborate, that does break down the barrier, because we have the business collaborating with the development and giving them that context, right? What is the value? What is the reason? What is the North Star? And with that understanding, then the developers can contribute more, right? And say, oh, you know what? Actually, maybe we should actually think about doing this. And it becomes more of a collaboration. It's not about who's thinking and doing, maybe, but it's everybody just getting on the same page on what value means and what execution might look like. So yeah, that's just my view.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have some views? No, I have one. I think there is. I mean, we know each other, and I'll just pretend the rest of the world is here too, and we know them. But ultimately, when you look at this from, first of all, it's not the sociological part, right? There's a lot of damage that's been done, and all these things as we're trying to progress and learn more. But it ties down for me into a couple things: is this notion of curiosity and this notion of belonging, right? We're people are curious, and a lot of times when we're young, that curiosity is stifled, and it's met. We meet that with fear. Be scared of something that you don't understand. And so this notion of belonging, when we're talking about the doers and the thinkers, it's how do we actually belong as one unit, like Simran was talking about, that we can actually target some goals that we're working on. And psychology shows and neuroscience shows, if we have some sort of North Star or some sort of direction that we understood, that we bought into, absolutely, that's something that I don't care who you are, we're just trying to do this thing. And that's something that I've seen that's been really powerful. And that's kind of the power of Scrum in putting it in that box, like I was talking about before. So yeah, there's a lot of hard questions, and we won't solve it, but we definitely are try to think about some actions that we can take. All right. So Simran, I have some questions for you, because I know that Scrum has been, and Agile has been, and teaching has been a way that you've been able to help break the bias, help work through stereotypes, your own and other people's. So let's just get into the psychology bit, where there's a cognitive bias called confirmation bias. So confirmation bias happens when you're looking for information that just supports your existing belief, right? I've met somebody this way, all those people must be that way. And what happens is we start to reject data that goes against that. So we tend to make biased decisions because honestly, we're probably not being open to all the relevant information. How do you think Scrum can help us against that?
One of the things that I'd like to highlight is that Scrum helps us create value and deliver value to the end customer frequently, right? So whether, let's say within the Scrum team, between the developers, the product owner, and the Scrum Master, we might have biases. Here is what we had come up with. Here was our idea, something that it's our baby. Yeah. We usually within that Scrum team might have biases where the developers have created something. They ask the product owner, hey, product owner, how does it look like? They even go on to ask the stakeholders, and maybe stakeholders have a little bit of confirmation bias the way you described it, because they are the ones who are asking for that, let's say, feature or whatever. Scrum, using Scrum, we are trying to iteratively deliver value to the end customer. We are actually asking the end customer, hey, here is what we have built. How does it look like to you? You give us the feedback, and based on that feedback, we are willing to adapt our product. And I think that is one of the ways you can look at Scrum on how it can break this confirmation bias. We're really asking from the horse's mouth, so to say, from the end customers, and we are happy to embrace the change that comes along our way.
So that's really important, Simran, that we actually get to that part of Scrum, right? Because how many people, how many teams and organizations are using Scrum to just, hey, this is how we manage our work. They don't think about that value piece, right? And that is what closes that bias in terms of, oh, well, you know, the other form of that is we just work together and we're like really good at working together and but we're actually not getting that feedback in. And that's why that's so important. Any other comments there?
I would also like to add about living the Scrum values. I think can really be beneficial here. I think you already used the word open, Patricia, earlier. So it's kind of being open to other perspectives, but also respect that there's other perspectives and beliefs. And I do like also say, like the value of courage to do the right thing and actually have the courage to go out there and look for maybe information that doesn't support your belief. Yeah, so that you're actually open to that. And committing to actually leveraging or committing to actually take that in consideration in your thought process. So I think the Scrum values, really living them, I think can really help with breaking those biases as well.
Oh boy. I'm really triggered to say, and how do you live the Scrum values? But that's a whole other day. That's a whole nother webinar.
I'm going to put myself on mute now.
No, that's a fabulous thing, and I think let's talk a little bit more about this. Okay, so and then I'd actually like to get to the questions. There's some really good questions, and I thank you for people, you know, for participating and submitting them. So we'll get to them. Okay, let's say in terms of more, you know, different biases. And again, from a psychological perspective, I'm really digging into this area. My background is organizational behavior. So there's another very light description, but a bias that's called fundamental attribution area. Whereas, and this is a bias, but imagine a sprint retrospective where all we do is that we as a team blame others for what we couldn't get done. Right. And this is cathartic when you're like managers and they don't understand and they're not respecting and that other team. Right. So there's a bias where we can always look for something external to put the blame on. How can a team, how can a Scrum Master, how can an Agile leader help that situation? Right. That type of bias where it's always about something else. And then once you let me know, I will call my mother and explain that to her also, because that's the lifestyle she leads. Mica.
Right. So that's an interesting one, Trish. And I'll say from experience, sometimes it's valid that, you know, there are these external factors, right, that contribute to, you know, success and failure of Scrum teams. But it becomes, I think the intent is good in some of these situations. Sometimes you just want to feel united, like, oh, we're all against, you know, this group of people external to the team that caused us to fail. There's almost that false perception that doing it that way gives you a sense of unity. But then truth is we're just focusing on the things that we can't control or that we can't influence, when actually we should maybe acknowledge that there are those factors, but then what can we then do to really take action to influence those and take control, right? What can we control to improve and get the team towards a better direction. So I think there's a bit of a pivot. Let's acknowledge that maybe there are those external factors, but then let's think about what are the factors within our realm of influence and control that we can do. Let's say you're saying the managers just don't understand Agile or Scrum, and therefore they're causing us to fail. So what can we do to help them understand? How can we get them with us to be part of that journey, right? Versus just saying, oh, they just don't get it, that's why we're always going to fail. So I think there's a little bit of that, and that's my perspective, Trish.
Thank you. Let's round up on this question and then take some questions, and then let's move to action. We'll do that in 19 minutes. Simran, do you think that, how do you think that Scrum can make environments more equitable for the people in the teams?
So Scrum offers these enabling constraints, where we talk about this term called self-managing teams. We have team members that are able to manage their own work. They are empowered. I would say that Scrum is designed in such a way that if, let's say, the product owner who is accountable for maximizing the ROI, well, if it's so, let him decide what's the next most important thing to do. So you're basically giving power in the hands of the people who are accountable for that piece of work. If the developers are accountable together as a team, in order to create a valuable increment that meets the quality criteria, well, give them that power to make decisions of how and how much. And I think that's what makes Scrum beautiful, where all of these three accountabilities as a Scrum team work with each other, and they are able to have this healthy tension amongst each other, hold each other accountable, and still be equally responsible for the product success, right, toward the higher objective. And I think that's key, something that makes Scrum more equitable, where you are equally responsible for the product's success as a whole, as a one single unit of the team.
Especially with the last update to the Scrum guide, frankly, where it's everybody's accountable. So yeah, we hope that. And then I will say that Simran is talking about the way that Scrum is meant and the power of Scrum and what it can do. Scrum, for me personally, is if empiricism embodies curiosity. I work on I've developed a framework called evidence-based management. It's just show us how we can progress and how we can look at outcomes. Then for me, Scrum is a great way to focus and to remove the noise and the overhead of the kind of crap that can be out there, bureaucracy, misperception, stereotypes. So thank you for that. So we have several questions that I'd like to go through. There's some of them are assertions, some of them are questions, but I think it'd be really great for us to talk to them through as a panel. So I'm just going to go through them in order. And the first one, Mica, this seems like a great place to start for us, is how can you use the Scrum framework to encourage C-level teams to accept more female leaderships? I'm just going to say you can't, but I'd love to hear your point.
Okay, so this is a really great question, and of course, again, tough to tackle, but realistically, going to the intent of Scrum, right, and the Scrum values. One of the first things we like to do for leadership, be it with the clients or the organizations we're working with, is train them, right? So what is this Scrum all about? So education is one of the top things that we need to do, because to them it's a buzzword. It's Scrum, Agile, whatever. It sounds cool. Put it in the agenda sometimes, right? With clients especially, but educating them on the values, and then empiricism, right, is about learning through doing, learning through experience, and then bringing them as part of the journey, right? Whether you're doing Nexus or Scrum, having them maybe put them as part of, have them attend the sprint demos, right? Sprint, not demos. Bad PST. Sprint review.
I'm going to mute you now.
eject from but you know what I mean. But yeah, but have them part of that journey, like experience it for themselves. I think that's a key thing too. Like educate them, and then bring them as part of the journey where it makes sense, right? Where they can, and then that tends to help. And again, there's no silver bullet, and it's still a struggle to this day. And I know, Trish, you work a lot with large scale organizations as well. With our clients, it helps that they experience that, but it's not a silver bullet. It's a continuously bringing them, showing the value, and having the people who are also working within that framework, within Scrum, evangelize, right, if you will, and talk to leadership about the value they see. So hearing about it and experiencing it, that's really helps. So
yeah, I think, and from my perspective, I think that a lot of, when you're talking about working with organizations, what I've encountered a lot is sometimes leaders see themselves above the change. Same thing, you can see it with what's going on with activism. Everybody puts something on Instagram, but where put your money where your mouth is, kind of thing. But that leadership, the way to get them into the conversation, in my experience, is to really focus on those goals and then come up and say, here's how we're looking at the progress that we're making toward that goal. Or now maybe we have to change, but have that information to pull them into that conversation. And as a female, as anybody, actually, I don't really care, but as anybody, that's how agility is meant to work. That's how we will succeed. And honestly, when you're talking about opportunity, if there's a seat at the table, pull one up, or pull up the chair, or just leave, make your own table. And those are really hard things to do, that I think some of us are still trying to navigate. Glaudia, there was a conversation that we were having, where we were talking about this notion, right? Agile coach, what I was just saying about the difference with gender and regardless of gender. How do we separate frustration where this is happening to me because I'm a female, or that person was a female, or that person was a man, or that person's this or this, that, and it's happening to me. And, I hate to say it, but I do this all the time. People do this all the time, where they pull the card and they're saying they must be treating me because of who I am. How do we navigate that? How do we separate it? And I would say, it's not always untrue, because people have their just biases. It's just natural. We look for patterns.
Yeah, but that's a tricky one. I usually don't go in with that mindset. So, so I don't go in with the mindset, oh, I'm a woman and therefore, you know what I mean? So when I work with teams, I usually, when I go in as an outsider, and that's a very a valid thing that I see in the Q&A as well. It's almost like you get an outsider almost telling people what to do. And that's not really when I go in with teams what I do. I will just listen to their concerns, what the problems are, and actually work together with them. So I don't really go in with the mindset thinking, oh, this is because I'm a woman. I do have, however, experienced it where it was blatantly in my face, where people actually almost make those comments. And I think that, then I think there's no escaping really to it. So, but yeah, I don't really, that probably doesn't answer your question. So I'm looking at my panel peers, if they have a better answer to this.
No, I think it's just an open discussion. So it's a good answer. Maybe as a follow-up to this, if we can continue this, Glaudia, it's like when we think about, one of the things Simran had said was that women naturally are servant leaders, just because of the way that we've had to lead by example and show that evidence, like Mica was talking about. So the Scrum Master role, if it's geared toward that, is that actually perpetuating a bias that Scrum Masters and women like that actually is the right place for people to be? Does the Scrum Master role, when we're asking for that quality to be brought, is that perpetuating the stereotype that women make good Scrum Masters and coaches? Like, it's just that women are better at it than men. And this is for anybody, and maybe Simran, because you had mentioned this earlier too.
Yep. Let me add just 2 cents, and maybe someone else, if you want to add anything from your context, you can do it. Being a businesswoman, I see this as an opportunity to do some business. Yeah. So maybe if I'm getting that opportunity because inherently I have those qualities, I would go for it. And if that makes me a true leader and it helps me brush up some of my skills, some leadership skills, I would look at this as one of those opportunities. And maybe, just maybe, it's perpetuating a bias. But well, if it is giving me some kind of advantage, why would I not go for it? That's just my 2 cents.
Mica?
So I think great points from both Glaudia and Simran. I think for me, it's like the opposite in the sense that are we just saying that it's only women who can be a good Scrum Masters because we're only saying only women can be servant leaders, right? So I think it's not. I mean, to Simran's point, if it's to my advantage, then great. But at the same time, we have to ask ourselves: are we therefore saying that hey, men cannot be servant leaders? Men cannot take on a position of servant leadership? And Glaudia, please go ahead.
Now, I think a really interesting part is that we see that what I see here at a lot of companies in the industry here is that there's also a lot of thought process that a Scrum Master needs to be technical and therefore be a man. So it's the other way around. I see that as well. So like, therefore, there's actually more male Scrum Masters I used to work with because of that thought process. So it's an interesting one. So
well, here's to follow that, because we're making now some probably assumptions about masculinity and men and males. So this question was interesting, and there was this person is sharing their experience of how their mother had to overcome, and did in her career, that her technical knowledge was just as good as her male counterparts. So how do we now today, as Scrum leaders, as people, use Scrum values to help the next generation of women engineers overcome this, like, I need to prove myself double just to be as good as you? How do we overcome that so that people, they don't have this feeling that people don't believe them? And I'm going to add that this is going to be a different experience for a white woman versus a Black woman versus a trans woman versus an Asian woman versus a Latina, all sorts of different things. There's a lot of shades in there. How do we start to do that so people can believe each other's experience?
And maybe I'll speak from my own experience, because I dealt with that as well. I was a young mother working in software development, and at that point I was doing development work, technical designs, development configuration, and yeah, but I had to deal with the whole working double time, maybe even triple time to prove myself. So how do we help the future generations? I think it's not really on the women, because the women are the ones who were experiencing this. It's more of, why are they even thinking that they have to work double, triple time to prove themselves? It's because of the bias of the people around them. So if we continuously work through the Scrum values, and I hope this doesn't sound kumbaya, this is being said repeatedly for a reason, because it's been experienced, right, by my fellow panelists, by myself, where I personally, the reason I shifted over to become a professional Scrum trainer, I was doing traditional waterfall work for a number of years in my journey. But it was because I saw that if you really live the Scrum values, right, we're talking about openness, we're talking about focus, right, focus on the goal, focus on objective outcomes, respect, right, for the differences in our situations, etc. It just enables, right, the teams to be all that more compassionate, understanding of each other, and then being able to focus on the right things, which is the objective outcomes. Because a young mother, an older mother, whatever, Asian, Black, white, we're going to have, again, different experiences. But I think if we're open and respectful, and we have that dialogue, and as women, I guess the courage is what comes in, right? We have to have the courage to speak up, and share our experience, and how we can be supported, and how we can also support them in their goals. So that's just my personal perspective from my own experience.
Thank you. Man, there are some excellent questions in here, and I can't wait to take a look at them, and we'll try to address them in some way, but we are rounding up. But there's a couple questions that I'm going to try to get in. And I'm just gonna open it up for us for discussion. So there's a comment that this panel is really focused around gender bias, and I would say we are looking at a lot of gender bias. So how are we, I suppose collective we, actively including trans men, trans women, non-binary people, and other intersectionalities in this conversation. And I will start with some of the things that I've been participating and trying. One of the things that I've been doing is participating in panels and conversations like this, where a great question like that comes up to kind of say, hey, you're talking about inclusivity, but we're talking from our lens. And so we all have our lens that adds a certain dynamic. And so I've been trying to participate in panels where I can learn, and I can also contribute to conversations that say, hey, you know, how are we dealing with this intersection, and how can we be more inclusive, and how can we bring that into leadership? So that's something that I'm trying to do to educate myself. And what it's led me to understand is that when we are looking through, you know, the circumstance where we're trying to create things that are equal, which is what Mica was talking about, we have to recognize that there are different experiences. But the thing when we bring it back to Scrum, which is beautiful, is this notion that we are working together as a team, bringing in all our edges and shapes and corners. And we are, again, thinking about this notion of a Scrum value of commitment. So I don't care who you are, but if we are coming here and we are committed to a goal and try to, you know, work toward those things, and we are looking at the evidence that can show that we can progress, that is an awesome thing. And I think that that is creating a safer space for us to work and be together as a team. So I'm sorry, I just went on a soapbox. But do you, does anybody else on the panel have some situations or some things where we're trying to bring in other conversations around, whether it be gender, whether it be race, whether it be color, whether it be AFAB, into the intersectionalities of our conversations? You know, are we missing something?
Okay, from my perspective, let me just quickly try to cover this, and I might not be able to cover for everyone, but here are my 2 cents. If anybody is trying to break any bias, there needs to be an impact first, and somebody needs to create that impact. Whatever you are, whether you're Asian, you're Indian, you come from a particular nationality, you're a woman, you're a trans, you're a man, you're trying to break a bias. That impact needs to be created in order to break that bias, and somebody needs to do that. And like the way I see it, Scrum offers us those tools to be able to break those biases. And I think that's just the way I look at it.
I would also say that Scrum just doesn't care who you are. It's the people who are uncomfortable with who you are. So yeah, thank you for that, Simran. There's this question about biases and heightened for working moms, and like women can do it all, and you know, how do you juggle work-life balance is really this notion about bias. But we're coming up on time, so this was a really great conversation. Thank you for everyone for staying on, listening. And there's a lot of different things in here that we'll make sure that we get back to the people who have been participating and asking questions. I just like to say that this week again is a special event, and we're going to have some more opportunities for us to engage and to have these tough conversations so we can all learn and become more enlightened. We're going to be having a mentorship session where there's a rotation of women PSTs who are going to be talked to, you know, different participants about their experiences. And we're also doing a lean coffee. So I don't know if there's space in those sessions, but if there is, a great way to continue this conversation. Just quickly, I'm sorry, we didn't get to do a wrap up on your biggest things, but how can people get in touch with each of you? Simran, how would people get in touch with you?
I'm available in LinkedIn, so you can just search my name. You will be able to find me. And I also have my Scrum.org profile, so just in case you want to look that up. That's a great place to connect with me. Thank you.
Mica?
Same thing, LinkedIn and Scrum.org profile.
Mm-hmm. And Glaudia?
Same, they already said it for me, so thank you.
So again, thank you everyone. This was hopefully stimulating about, you know, different things that we need to be aware of and to like Simran said, create some impact and break some future biases. Thank you for participating. Scrum on. Bye.